She stood beneath a broken sign that read "Help Wanted." All day, people passed by, some stared, some whispered, but no one stopped. Her skin was different, her eyes too bright. She did not belong here, and everyone knew it. Still, she waited. Was she waiting for work, for food, or for someone brave enough to see her not as an alien, but as a person? The sun began to sink. Shadows stretched long across the street. She clutched her small bag tighter, her hope fading with the light. Then at last a human stopped. He looked at her, not with fear, not with hate, but with something she hadn't seen in a very long time. A question burned in his eyes. "Why are you here?" And with that moment, her life and his would never be the same again. Under the fading glow of the evening sun, the alien girl stood silently beneath the crooked wooden board that still carried the words "Help Wanted." The paint on the sign was chipped, and the letters were fading, but the message was still clear. People walked past her every hour, rushing to their homes, carrying bags, speaking on devices, and laughing in groups. They noticed her, yes, but only in the way someone notices a shadow at the edge of the road. Their eyes slid over her, curious for a moment, then quickly turned away. She held a small bag close to her chest, the strap worn thin from long use. Inside, there was nothing valuable, nothing heavy, just a few old things that she could not leave behind. Her clothes were plain, but carried a strange texture, the fabric not quite like human cloth. Her hands gripped the bag tightly, as if it were the only anchor keeping her from falling apart. She had been standing there since morning, waiting, hoping, but as the sun lowered, her hope slowly dimmed. Her eyes were unlike the others around her. They carried a glow, faint but undeniable, a reflection of stars that did not belong to Earth. Sometimes children pointed at her, whispering to their parents, but the parents quickly pulled them away, shaking their heads. She was different, and different was often ignored. Yet she stayed, her posture straight, her gaze firm. She was waiting for something or perhaps someone. Every hour, the street grew noisier, then quiet again. She watched shopkeepers lock their doors, watched the lights of vehicles flash by, watched strangers move in and out of restaurants. She did not move much, only shifted her feet when they grew tired. The sign above her creaked gently in the evening breeze, almost as if it too was tired of waiting. The alien girl remembered the words she had heard long ago. Wait where people are. Someone will notice. Someone will help. But all day, no one had noticed. Or maybe they had noticed, but they had chosen not to stop. The thought pressed heavy on her chest, but still she did not leave. She would not leave. Not yet. Her stomach ached faintly from hunger, but she did not complain. She had endured worse. What mattered most now was finding a hand to hold, a voice that did not push her away. She searched every passing face, hoping for kindness, but saw only hurried steps and cold glances. Each time someone slowed, her heart rose, only to sink again when they continued without a word. As the evening deepened, shadows stretched across the street, painting the road in darker tones. The air grew cooler, and the crowd thinned. Her legs trembled slightly from standing so long, but she steadied herself. If she left now, everything she had endured to reach this place would mean nothing. She whispered softly to herself, words in her own tongue, words of courage, reminding herself not to give in to fear. The lamp above the shop flickered to life, casting pale light onto her figure. She looked fragile there, standing alone beneath the sign. Yet there was a quiet strength in her stillness. The world rushed around her, but she remained like a stone in a river, unshaken. And then, at last, something changed. A human man slowed his steps as he approached. Unlike the others, he did not hurry past. He looked at her directly, his brow furrowing not in anger, but in curiosity. His eyes lingered on the bag she held, the tired way she stood, the quiet glow in her eyes. For the first time that day, she felt seen. He stopped in front of her. The street was quieter now, only the hum of distant traffic filling the air. She lifted her head, unsure if this was another moment of false hope. But his gaze did not slide away. He did not pretend she was invisible. He was looking at her, and only her. For a few seconds, no words passed between them. The human seemed to search her face, as if trying to understand the story written there. She felt her heartbeat quicken. Should she speak first? Should she tell him why she was here? Fear tangled with hope inside her chest. Finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady, not sharp like the others she had heard earlier. "Why are you standing here all day?" he asked gently. She parted her lips, but the words did not come easily. How could she explain everything? How could she tell him about the long journey, the fear, the loneliness, the desperate wish for a place where she could belong? For a moment, she simply held his gaze, uncertain if she should trust him. But then she saw something in his eyes, a softness, a quiet promise that he was not here to mock or push her away. Slowly, she whispered, her voice trembling, I am waiting for someone who will not turn away." The human man tilted his head, studying her with more care. There was no laughter, no fear in his face, only thought, only concern. The words hung in the air between them, simple yet heavy with meaning, and in that small moment, beneath the old wooden sign, something unseen shifted. The world had ignored her all day, but this one human had stopped. This one human had chosen to see her. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew her life was about to change forever. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken meaning. The girl lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked back at the man standing before her. She had been ignored so many times that she almost did not believe this was real. Yet he was still there, waiting for her answer, not rushing away like the rest. He shifted his bag to one side and said softly, "It's late. You should not stay here all night." His words were simple, but his tone carried something she had not heard in a long time: concern. She wanted to answer quickly, but her tongue felt stiff, her thoughts trapped between fear and hope. Finally, she nodded once, her fingers tightening on her small bag. She did not explain much, only whispered, "I have nowhere else." The man's expression changed slightly. He did not frown, but there was a quiet seriousness in his eyes. He glanced at the dark street, then back at her. After a pause, he said, "Come with me, at least until morning. You should rest." The girl hesitated. A dozen thoughts ran through her mind. She had been told to be careful, told not to trust easily, told that humans could be unkind. But she had also been told to wait for someone who would notice her. And now he stood here, offering what no one else had given: kindness. Slowly, she nodded again. They walked together down the quiet road. She kept her steps light, careful, almost like a shadow. He walked at a steady pace, not looking at her too much, giving her space. She noticed that about him: he did not stare the way others did. He treated her as if she were simply another traveler beside him. That small detail warmed her heart. The street grew darker as they turned into a quieter part of town. Lamps glowed faintly, and the sound of traffic faded. She watched the windows of houses they passed, the shapes of families inside, laughing, eating, living. For a moment, she wished she could belong to such a place, even if only for one night. At last, they reached a small building. It was not large or bright, but it carried the feeling of being lived in. The man opened the door, stepping aside so she could enter first. She paused on the threshold, her chest tight with nerves, then slowly stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of wood and something warm from the kitchen. She looked around quietly, her eyes tracing the shelves, the scattered books, the worn sofa, and the soft light from a single lamp. It was ordinary, yet to her, it felt extraordinary. A safe place, a roof, a space where the world could not see her. He set down his bag and gestured gently. "Sit, you must be tired." She moved carefully to the edge of the sofa, placing her small bag in her lap. Her posture was straight, her eyes watchful, but inside she was beginning to relax. For the first time all day, she was not standing under the cold stares of strangers. The man stepped into the kitchen, and she heard the faint clatter of cups. He returned soon with warm water in a glass. She accepted it with both hands, bowing her head slightly in thanks. The warmth seeped through her fingers, chasing away the chill she had carried since morning. For a long time, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of the clock on the wall. At last, he sat across from her and asked quietly, "Why were you waiting there, all day, under that old sign?" Her fingers tightened around the glass. She looked down, unsure of how much to tell. She wanted to trust him, but trust was not something she could give easily. She searched his face, saw no judgment there, only patience. Slowly, she said. I was told that if I waited, someone would come. Someone who would not turn away. The man leaned back slightly, thoughtful. And you waited the whole day for that chance? She nodded once. Yes. He studied her for a moment, then spoke softly. That takes strength. The words caught her by surprise. People had called her strange, out of place, even foolish but never strong. Her chest warmed at his tone. For a moment, she wanted to tell him everything, where she had come from, why she had run, what she carried that made her afraid. But the words stayed locked inside. Instead, she whispered, I only needed someone to see me. He gave a small nod, as if he understood more than she had said aloud. He did not press her with more questions, and she was grateful. The room grew quiet again, the evening outside settling into deeper night. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders finally lowering after a long day of tension. Her eyes drifted toward the window, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw something movement in the shadows outside. She blinked, and it was gone. Perhaps it was only her tired mind playing tricks, but even as she sat there, safe in the warmth of this small home, a whisper of unease stirred inside her. She had found shelter for tonight, but she knew her journey was not over. Something was still out there, waiting in the dark. The night stretched long and quiet inside the small home, but the alien girl did not feel fully at peace. She sat on the sofa, her small bag held close, her glowing eyes flicking often toward the window. The man noticed her unease but said nothing, only moving about the house quietly, giving her space. He seemed to understand that she was like a bird that had flown too far, too tired to rest, but too weary to let down her guard. Outside, the town had fallen silent. Only the soft hum of distant lamps and the occasional sound of a passing vehicle broke the stillness. The man returned with a blanket and placed it gently on the sofa beside her. You can sleep here tonight, he said. His voice was steady, offering comfort without pressure. She bowed her head slightly in thanks, but did not lie down yet. Her eyes kept drifting to the window. When the man finally went to another room, she stayed seated, listening. Every creak of the wooden floor, every sigh of the wind outside made her tense. At last, she rose and walked quietly to the window, parting the curtain just enough to peek through. For a moment, she saw nothing, just the empty street, bathed in the weak glow of a streetlight. Then, at the edge of the shadows, she thought she saw a faint flicker, like a reflection of something metallic. Her heart skipped a beat. She stepped back quickly, her chest tightening. She pressed her back against the wall, clutching her bag closer. Her thoughts raced. Had they already found her? Had she been followed here? She closed her eyes, whispering words in her own tongue, words meant to calm, words of courage. But her hands trembled slightly. When the man returned, he noticed her pale face, the way she stood away from the window. What's wrong? He asked gently. She hesitated. For hours she had kept her truth hidden, afraid that speaking it aloud would only bring danger. But now the weight inside her chest grew too heavy to carry alone. Slowly, carefully, she said, Someone is searching for me. The man looked at her with quiet surprise, but did not interrupt. She took a deep breath, her voice low but steady. I left my home. It was not safe there. I thought I could hide here, far away. But they do not stop. They keep looking. His brow furrowed slightly. And now, she nodded faintly toward the window. I think they are near. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The man did not speak, did not question further, but his eyes softened. He could see the fear she tried so hard to hide, the way her hands trembled though she stood tall. Instead of asking for more details, he simply said, Then you are not alone anymore. Her chest tightened at those words. She lowered her gaze, struggling to hold back the sudden wave of emotion rising inside her. She had been alone for so long, moving from place to place, hiding, waiting. To hear those words spoken so calmly, so simply, it almost felt like a promise. The hours passed slowly after that. She finally lay down on the sofa, though sleep came only in fragments. Each time she drifted off, she dreamed of footsteps in the dark, of voices calling her name, of long shadows reaching for her. Each time she woke, she found the man nearby, sitting quietly in a chair, as if keeping watch. Near midnight, she stirred again, her eyes opening to a soft glow beyond the curtain. She froze. A light, faint and pulsing, hovered outside, then vanished as quickly as it appeared. She sat up, her heart racing. The man followed her gaze and stood, moving toward the window. He pulled the curtain aside, just enough to look. The street was empty again. Only silence waited outside. He frowned, then let the curtain fall back. "Maybe only the lamp," he said. But she shook her head slowly. "No, it was them. I know it." He studied her, the certainty in her voice. He could see she was not guessing. She had lived with this fear long enough to know the signs. She sat back down, her hands twisting the fabric of her bag. Finally, she whispered, "I cannot stay here long. If they find me, they will not stop." The man leaned against the wall, arms folded loosely. "Then tomorrow, we will think of a way. But tonight, you are safe here." His words settled over her like a shield, fragile but steady. For the first time, she allowed her eyes to close without forcing them open again. Sleep found her slowly, and though her dreams were restless, the steady presence of the man nearby gave her strength. Outside, the street lay silent, but the air seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere beyond the shadows, unseen eyes were still searching. Morning light crept slowly through the thin curtains, painting soft lines across the room. The alien girl stirred, her small bag still clutched against her chest as if it were part of her. She blinked against the light, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. Not on the road, not under the sign, but in the quiet shelter of a stranger's home. The man was already awake. He moved quietly in the kitchen, the gentle sound of water heating filling the silence. He glanced toward her as she sat up. "You slept a little," he said simply. She nodded, though her eyes were heavy with memories of broken dreams. "Yes, a little." He placed a cup on the table for her, steam rising faintly. She touched it carefully, surprised at the warmth. For a while, neither spoke. The silence was not empty, but thoughtful, as if both were waiting for the right moment at last. He sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "You said last night that someone is looking for you," he said, his tone calm, not demanding. "I won't force you to tell me more, but if you want me to help, maybe I need to understand." Her fingers tightened around the cup. She had held her secret for so long, locked it away behind silence. But she could not carry it forever. She lifted her gaze slowly, her glowing eyes catching the morning light. "My name is not one you would know," she began softly. "But I will tell you. It is Sira." The syllables slipped from her lips like a fragile truth finally set free. The man repeated it quietly. "Sira." He nodded, as if to say he would remember. She continued, her voice low but steady. "I am not from this world. My home is far beyond your stars. A colony where the sky burns gold and the rivers sing at night. I lived there once. I was ordinary, just one among many." Her eyes grew distant, as if she could still see it, hear it. She paused. Then her tone changed, heavier now. "But I learned something I was not meant to know. I found truths hidden beneath the surface, secrets about our leaders, about the way they control us. They feared what I had seen, so they marked me as dangerous. Not because I had done wrong, but because I carried knowledge that could change everything." The man's brow furrowed slightly. Though he stayed quiet, letting her speak. "They wanted to silence me," Sira whispered. "So I ran. I crossed stars, carrying only what I could hold. I thought Earth would be far enough, hidden enough. But they did not stop searching. They cannot allow me to speak. Not here, not anywhere." Her hands trembled around the cup. She lowered her eyes. "And now, I have brought danger here. To you." For a moment, silence wrapped the room. The man studied her, his face unreadable. Then he said softly, "You did not choose to be hunted. You only chose to survive." Her throat tightened. She had expected fear, maybe anger, perhaps even rejection. But his words carried none of that. They carried understanding. She whispered, almost in disbelief, "You do not turn away." He shook his head. "Why would I? You needed someone to stop. And I did." A faint smile flickered at the edge of her lips. The first true smile she had shown in a long time. It felt strange, almost foreign, but warm. They sat together for a while, Sira telling fragments of her story. She spoke of the city she had left behind, of friends who had turned their faces away when the leaders named her a traitor, of the narrow escapes that had brought her across the stars. She spoke of the long silence of space, of the weight of loneliness pressing harder with each passing day. And through it all, the man listened without interruption, his steady gaze never leaving her. When she finally fell quiet, the room seemed to exhale. She had carried her truth like a stone in her chest, and though it was still heavy, sharing it had made it bearable. The man leaned back, thoughtful. So that's why they follow you. Not because of what you did, but because of what you know. Sira nodded. Yes, they fear knowledge, and I fear being caught. He tilted his head slightly, a faint smile touching his lips. Then perhaps fear is something we will face together. Her heart skipped at those words. Together. She had been alone for so long that the thought almost felt unreal, but the sincerity in his voice was undeniable. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. But inside that small home, something had shifted. A fragile trust had taken root, quiet yet strong. Later, as the day wore on, Sira moved to the window again. The street outside looked calm, but her sharp eyes caught details the man might miss. A shadow that lingered too long, a figure that moved with purpose, then vanished. She felt the old unease rise again. They are close, she whispered. The man stepped beside her, following her gaze. He saw only an empty street, but he did not doubt her words. Then we'll prepare, he said simply. Sira turned to him, surprised by his calmness. You would stand with me, even knowing what comes. He met her eyes steadily. You waited all day under that sign for someone who would not turn away. Maybe that's why I was meant to stop. Her chest ached with unspoken gratitude. She had expected to be alone until the end. But now, for the first time, she believed she might not face it alone at all. The days turned into weeks, and the small apartment that once felt temporary now began to feel like something else, like a home. The girl moved quietly, almost floating from room to room, careful not to disturb anything that wasn't hers. But little by little, her presence began to change the place. A chair she pulled closer to the window, a small pattern she drew in the dust on the table, the faint sound of her hum at night when she thought he was asleep. He noticed everything, though he pretended not to. She was becoming less of a stranger and more of a part of his life. And yet, there were moments when her eyes drifted far away, as if she was listening to voices he could not hear, or remembering stars he could not see. Those moments reminded him she was not from here, and he wondered if she would ever truly stay. One evening, as they shared a meal of simple bread and fruit, she asked him softly, "Why did you stop for me that day?" Her voice was quiet, almost afraid of the answer. He looked at her, surprised by the question. "Because no one else did," he said honestly. "And you looked like you had been waiting too long, for a long time." She said nothing, but her eyes softened, and for the first time, she smiled without holding it back. It was a smile that carried both relief and sadness, like someone who had finally been seen. But just as their bond grew stronger, the world outside began to notice. Neighbors whispered more often now, their glances sharper, their curiosity turning into suspicion. Questions followed him at work. Where had she come from? Why was she with him? What was he hiding? He gave no answers, but the weight of their doubt pressed heavier each day. One night, he found her standing at the window, staring at the city lights with an expression he couldn't read. "They know," she whispered. "They will come." He stepped closer, confused and uneasy. "Who will come?" he asked. She turned her head slightly, her bright eyes catching the faint glow from outside. "The ones who never wanted me to find help. The ones who wanted me to remain alone." Her words filled the room with a silence that felt too heavy to break. He wanted to ask more, to understand, but the look on her face told him that some truths carried danger just in speaking them. And yet, despite the warning, she turned to him with a quiet strength. "But I am not alone anymore," she said. "You gave me that." It was then he realized that whatever she had escaped, whatever shadows followed her, had now reached him too. And though he did not yet know what they would face, he knew he would not let her go back to the loneliness from which she came. The night stretched on, filled with questions left unanswered. But in the quiet between them, a new certainty formed. Her journey was now his as well, and neither of their lives would ever be ordinary again. Asterisk the night after her warning felt different. The air was heavy, almost waiting, as if the world itself knew something was about to change. He woke before dawn to find her sitting by the window again, knees drawn close, her eyes fixed on the sky. She wasn't watching the city lights this time, she was watching the horizon, where the first glow of morning was breaking. He sat beside her quietly, not wanting to startle her thoughts. After a while, she spoke. I used to think no one would ever stop for me. That maybe I was meant to stand under that sign forever, invisible, forgotten. She turned to him, her voice soft but steady. But then you did, and everything after. I no longer feel like a shadow. He didn't answer at once. He simply reached for the small cup of tea he had prepared, offering it to her. She accepted it carefully, her fingers brushing against his. For a moment, their silence said more than words could. The days that followed were quieter, almost as if the world outside had decided to wait too. The whispers of neighbors faded, and though suspicion lingered, nothing happened. It was as though the storm she had spoken of was circling, but had not yet found them. And in that space of calm, something beautiful grew between them. They shared small things, her laughter at his clumsy attempts to teach her a card game, the way she tilted her head in wonder at music coming from an old radio, the way she walked barefoot on the balcony, as if touching the ground connected her to something she had lost long ago. Each moment tied them closer together, thread by thread, until neither of them could imagine life without the other. But even in peace, there were reminders of what lingered beyond. At times, she would pause mid-sentence, as though catching a sound only she could hear. At other times, her gaze would turn skyward, not with fear but with longing, as though the stars whispered her true home. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she finally spoke of it. If they come, if they find me, I don't know what will happen, but I know one thing. She reached for his hand, holding it firmly now, with no hesitation. I will not leave you behind. Even if the stars call me back, you are my choice. His chest tightened with a mix of fear and warmth. He didn't know what forces might rise, or what it meant for her to choose him over the world she had come from. But he knew her words were real, and that was enough. That night, he dreamed of a sky full of lights, not threatening, not cruel, but watching. And in that dream, he stood beside her, their hands joined, unafraid of whatever might come. When morning returned, it was gentle. She was still there, still with him, her presence no longer uncertain but solid, like an answer that had been waiting all along. And though questions remained about who she truly was, about what waited beyond the horizon, they no longer felt like burdens. Instead, they felt like doors, waiting to be opened together. For the first time in her long journey, she was not waiting alone. And for the first time in his ordinary life, he knew that what had begun under a simple sign had become something far greater, something neither of them would ever let go.